Hello and welcome to our Friday Freebie. Our Friday Freebie footnote.
That's 3 F's.
Triple F. Friday Freebie footnote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We started a new series called Footnote. It's an audio podcast, similar to what we've been doing on Facebook and the table talk and all that stuff, but without so much dish rattling and food rustling kind of sounds in the background, but also just, we're actually making these things available strictly for our subscribers and people who might want to pay for a particular podcast, whatever. But we're doing these freebies to kind of promote that idea, but also just, kind of check in with people.
Right, check in. We have a couple of things we want to talk about today, which we don't want to take more than 25 minutes to go over this. The first thing that I'd like to bring up is the duplicity of the Green New Deal. And especially when it comes to the segment of the latest huge package that was passed, the huge financial plan, the financial package, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, the CARES Act, whatever it is, a huge portion of that was allocated towards public transportation. And what's happening in public transportation, and I can say this, based on experience because I take it, is that they're actually taking away service, which is in contradiction to this marketing around public transportation, which is that it's a green option. So get out of your cars and get on the buses, get out of your cars and get on the trains. But yet here in Pittsburgh, they're actually taking away service. So whereas before my local bus would run every 30 minutes, now it runs every 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's something that Rosa Quare had said at the very beginning. There are not going to be jackbooted thugs to force you into these concentrated cities where there's surveillance and you have everything at your fingertip within a 5-minute walk away. They're just going to take away services. They'll take away your public transportation bus routes. They'll take away the paving of the streets. They'll take away options to grocery. They'll close down your post office.
Right. Well,
and to force you into these little concentrated, heavily surveilled 5, 10, 15-minute neighborhoods that are within larger cities. They're all over Chicago. They're all over San Francisco. They're all over Philadelphia. They're all over Boston.
Well,
right?
And not only that, but it'll be mostly in like benign neglect, like letting roads go to hell, right?
Yeah, that's what she said.
Yeah, that's what she's talking
so
about.
We're witnessing
but things
this.
not taken away, but necessarily, but things going away. But I want to point something out. The fact that these bus routes, they're not gone. They didn't erase them. They didn't take them away. They're just making them unavailable now and then.
Right.
It's random. Then they're blaming, personnel issues, right? So when a bus driver doesn't show up, that route doesn't get serviced for, a shift, which means that every couple of hours or however the rotation goes, there may be 2-3 bus drivers per route during a day. That hole is in place during that entire shift. And so it raises hell with the ability for people to take that bus when they need to take the bus, and instead they have to create workarounds.
Right. So this largely affects working class people, or people like me or in general, just anybody who lives in a concentrated urban environment and does not have a car, chooses not to have a car. One of the reasons we chose the house that we live in here in Pittsburgh is because it's literally a 90-second walk to the local bus stop, which then takes me to downtown Pittsburgh in 15 minutes. Why would I need a car? I purposefully moved here for that bus stop. And now they've drastically reduced my ability to get to where I need to go. I had an appointment today and I was worried I would be late for my appointment because they took away the time that I would need to be on the bus to get to my appointment. You see what I'm saying? So I thought, okay, well, this is marginally affecting, or this is targeting communities of color, this is targeting the poorer communities or the working class communities. And JP corrected me and said, actually, if you look at the transit alerts, which tell you which buses are out of service, there's also this bus that's out of service, which services a high tax bracket income, a very nice community.
It happens to that particular bus line as frequently as it does to our particular bus line.
Exactly.
And it's random too.
Right. And there's no rhyme or reason to this. So if you are somebody who needs to be at work at 11 a.m. and you work, say, like an 11 to 2 shift, maybe you're making burgers for the lunch crowd from 11 to 2, and that bus is out of commission, the bus that you need to take at 10:30 to get you to your job at 11 is out of commission, then you're screwed. You have no way to get to your job. It also adversely affects this higher tax bracket, which might need to take the bus to get to their downtown job. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this term equity is an equal distribution of the takeaway for everybody. So when you hear equity, it doesn't mean that you're lifting up communities of color or communities of that are working class or impoverished and rely on public transportation as their sole source of transportation. They don't have cars. They can't afford a lift every day, so they have to take the bus. What it does is it affects everybody across the board. So these people that live in these higher tax brackets and have better incomes are equally affected in negative ways as the people in the poor communities.
Right.
That's what equity means, where everybody gets pushed down.
Right.
Okay, so there's, I really wanted to.
But they always imply that it's marginalized communities and
right. And so we have a first
that are being lifted up to make it an equitable experience for all.
Right. So with this story about the fact that from 9 o'clock in the morning until about 3 o'clock this afternoon, there were 4 buses on my route that were canceled. That's huge. That means that anybody who needs to get to work or get downtown or get to appointments is really screwed. And so with that comes the questions that I have. If you're putting all this money, if you're allocating billions of dollars into public transportation, then why are you why are you reducing public transportation service, especially when you market public transportation as a green, saving the planet type thing? Get out of your cars, get into the bus. Okay, so that is hypocritical. Without having options to take public transportation, people are then going to get in their cars. So it's having an adverse effect on the very thing that you claim it's supposed to benefit, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing about this whole public transportation situation that I am personally actually dealing with is this idea of equity. I'm affected. The poorer people, all around me are affected. The better neighborhoods that are not as poor are affected. Like, this is what equity means, where everybody gets pushed down. So there's a deeper meaning here. It's not just, oh man, here we go again. The bus is canceled. This particular 9:30 a.m. bus that I needed is not in service. I have to wait for the one that comes at 10:15. It's not just that. There's a bigger story there, so that's even a larger narrative. Like, pay attention to these little things that happen in your communities, because it means something much bigger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or it's an indication, right?
It's an indicator,
yeah.
Right.
And it could be like the canary in the coal mine kind of indicator, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
So something else we've been noticing, and I've been paying attention to this a lot, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why, and I'll explain what I mean. I've been noticing a lot of narratives in various forms and media, whether it's a commercial, it's an article in the New York Times, or something coming across the feed somewhere in the newswire, and that is that everything is being now blamed on Trump. And let me just preface this, like, those of you who know us, that we don't like Trump or don't care about Trump. We don't care. We don't
care
support
about anyone.
we don't support a state. We don't support voting. We don't support liberal democracy or representative democracy. Because we take an anarchist stance. So this is a caveat. The only reason I'm bringing this up is for another reason, and the reason is that all these narratives are going on, and they're setting up Trump, and Trump is being used as a symbol, and he's being used as sort of a he's a scapegoat, but he's being used as a symbol to represent all the people that voted for him. Now, why is this a bad thing? Well, I heard a political commercial yesterday where the narrative... Okay, first of all, it was a commercial, so you cannot trust it. The guy he comes out and he says, I'm a lifelong Republican, blah, 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 Trump, blah, blah, blah. And the whole narrative was about how Trump was to blame for the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol building. And not only that, but he led people who might have, who thought they were believing the right thing, and they were doing what he told them to do, but didn't realize that they were being led into this, illegal activity. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is really going far. This is going really far. The other thing that they've been blaming him on.
Well, they stormed Mar-a-Lago. So.
They stormed Mar-a-Lago. There's this has been going on. Since,
the FBI did, not people.
Right.
The people apparently stormed the Capitol,
right.
But the FBI then stormed Mar-a-Lago.
They didn't get anywhere with the Russia narrative.
Nope.
They didn't get anywhere with a lot of things during the whole time that he was as a president, and now they're pushing this thing. I still don't think they're going to get away with it either. But what was the other thing that you brought up to me?
Well, today I learned that there's language coming out that Trump is going to be blamed for those who have suffered injury as a result of getting the COVID shot. Mm-hmm. Injury and death as a result of getting the COVID shot.
Right. So
they're gonna take that truth, which has been so beautifully
crafted.
Well, they're going to take it. It's not crafted. I mean, there's good investigation behind the dangers of a bioweapon.
Sure.
Imagine that. A bioweapon actually causes people injury.
Right.
Shocking, I know. But so so that's coming out, that people are becoming injured as a result of the COVID shot.
They're blaming Trump for that, as
right?
Opposed to
they're because you have Deborah Birx, which I mentioned before. In another, audio, you have Deborah Birx and you have Fauci coming out and saying, and they've both resigned their positions, shaking their fist at the Trump administration, saying, that it was badly done. It was like he was irresponsible.
So on one hand, the New York Times comes out and says that he didn't act fast enough. Mm-hmm. And now he's being blamed for the injuries that took place from the vaccine.
They're starting to go towards that language.
So that's the means of deflecting from the pharmaceutical companies that are to blame. Right. So instead of people
other people that are to blame.
Right.
And I know that you cringe when I say this, but they may be living outside our borders, and that's all I will say about that.
I think that's and I think that is somewhat of a fallacy in that it's taking away the blame from the actual cause.
Right. So the actual cause is capitalism, basically.
Basically.
But, and capitalism doesn't have a border.
Right.
Capitalism doesn't have a country.
Right.
There are people... Right now you've got Paul Pelosi's son, who is he's the second largest shareholder of an Internet of Bodies organization or company that's based out of China.
Right.
So capitalism doesn't have a border.
Right. And so then you have, and then you have Naomi Wolf coming along and saying, well, there's a guy who's a C-level officer meaning the corporate, like a chief of
right. So like
CEO or whatever of this company, and the name Fosun
Fosun Pharmaceutical,
right? Yeah. Which is a a German Chinese co.
Right.
Anyway, it's a company that's put on, that was started by the Chinese and the Germans, whatever, however you put it. I don't fuck. Anyway,
right. And BioNTech.
Okay, but yeah. So it's a biotech company, and they're responsible for like distributing all these vaccines, right? Naomi Wolf is like pointing out that the CEO or some high up in that company is also part of the government of the Chinese Communist Party, and so whatever, that's fine, but she chooses to ignore the fact, like what you were talking about with Paul Pelosi and some of these other assholes who are also involved with our government, who are involved with the pharmaceutical companies in the West. Okay.
Right.
So
now, hang on.
So you've got these both sides
right.
of these
yeah,
groups,
you do.
and they're dogpiling. And I don't give a shit about China, but what I'm trying to say is that they're pointing their fingers maybe at the wrong place or for the wrong reasons.
So I think let's break it down just a sec, and then we'll get to the actual point, and then we'll end. So first of all, Wolf and her crew, her 3,500 investigators, have been entirely focused on damages, entirely focused on adverse events, specifically to women as a result of this bioweapon that was created by Americans, Germans, and the Chinese. And that's it. So she probably doesn't even know about the Paul Pelosi being the second largest shareholder for this huge Internet of Bodies or Internet of Things corporation based out of China. She probably doesn't even know that because that's not her focus.
No, and that's just an outlier. But what I'm trying to say is,
excuses,
I know, but what I'm trying to say is there are people involved with the pharmaceutical industry that are also in our government.
Right, exactly.
And she chooses to ignore that.
So I don't think she chooses to ignore it because she has lived. I'm not trying to defend.
It doesn't support her narrative.
I'm not trying to defend her, but I'm also like, I'm also listening to her a lot, and what she's saying is that we have bad actors within our government and without our government.
That's fine.
So, and what you want to focus on, rather than turning to another country, is what you want to focus on is the level of tyranny and the level of traitorous actions that your own country has taken against its own citizens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that will then line up with your anarchist view, which is that government is not to be trusted.
Right.
Why would you trust your own government after they have unleashed a bioweapon on you? And that's where you're saying we should begin with that conversation rather than begin about like what's happening outside our borders.
Right, and
there are
and shit like that.
bad actors outside of the borders. That is a fact. It is there. And so our military should be addressing that. And I think they are in a way. But we need to be focused on the bad actors right here on our own soil that have waged war on their own people.
Right. Well, and you can't expect the state to fight a problem within the state.
Right. So the state is the problem. The state has waged war and unleashed a bioweapon unknowingly on an innocent population. The state needs to go. Is what you're saying,
right.
And I get that.
Right.
I get that.
But
you're both saying the exact same thing because she is not absolving our own government of its bad, of its
responsibility.
Of its responsibility for being
right.
So let's get to the whole point of let's get back on track and talk about why they're bringing Trump in as the foil.
Right.
Like, so the narrative has increased that more and more people are injured as a result of the COVID shot. It's becoming very mainstream now.
So what we've been seeing over the past few years is the blaming Trump for a number of things, but also blaming the voters, the people who support him.
Right.
We have this narrative.
Even non-voters.
Right.
Blaming non-voters who aren't even. It's like, I'm not part of your psychopathy. Okay, you are so fucking delusional that you think that your government is going to save you. Okay, that's mean. People are Americans, they vote. Okay, so whatever. But I'm like, hey, look, don't blame me. I'm actually addressing liberals right now who personally blamed me because I didn't vote for Hillary or Trump, who personally blamed me. I wasn't even part of your stupid theatrical 2016 election.
Right.
And you're still blaming me because your orange-headed monster was put in place. Like, grow the fuck up. I'm not part of your problem.
Okay, so let me. So
you know. Anyway, that pisses me off when liberals do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, so this is another version of that, and we had this narrative this week of those guys who were found guilty of kidnapping the governor of Michigan.
Plotting to kidnap.
Oh, plotted.
They didn't actually kidnap
Okay,
her.
see, yeah, because then they would have had to prove that she was kidnapped. Yeah,
exactly.
they plotting because these guys were personas; they didn't exist.
No governor is going to get kidnapped.
This is all theater. Right. These guys are personas; they did not exist. You can make up the whole story. You can say that they were convicted. You can show footage of them being hauled away in cuffs to go to prison. The end.
Right.
There's no follow-up. There's no
Right.
way of following up and making sure that this actually took place. The New York Times may do a follow-up story in a year or two and show those persona photos, but this is not a real thing, and it supports this narrative of the white supremacy narrative that they keep pushing, the Trumpism narrative that they keep pushing. All of this is about basically taking a portion of the population and blaming it. In other words, what you came out and told me, civil war.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
and I say that really, really
reluctantly.
Because I have been really good about not bringing that up this entire time.
Well, because
people started talking about Civil War back in 2020.
Right, and I think that was pushed by influencers. I think that this is a word or a phrase that has been pushed because they want you to start thinking in those terms. They are pushing people to civil war, and now and since that didn't work and all the other shenanigans didn't work, they're going to start doing other things like shifting blame from the individual Trump to the people who supported him. And this has already been going on, but I think it's going to get heavier and hotter.
Yeah.
And we're going to see more stories like, these dumbasses that they allegedly plotted to kidnap Whitmer, right?
I know. It's like, wow, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Well, and you don't have to prove anything.
For that one.
You didn't, she didn't go missing, right? So they don't have to prove that she was missing. And they didn't, but they were plotting it. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
So you'll get more and more of these types of scenarios that are credible, but you don't necessarily have to prove them.
Right. Well, they're credible in your imagination only.
Exactly. It's the theater of the mind.
Exactly. So what we have is this idea that the vaccine injured or the COVID shot injured or those who followed Trump's national emergency guidelines, which, he was basically doing what the health czars were telling him to do. Which is like, okay, I'm gonna declare a national emergency on March 13th of 2020, and I'm gonna support the governors and whatever they need to do to keep, their states safe. And that was, at first it was lockdown, and then it eventually turned into masking. And then in 2021, came the rollout of the COVID shot.
Meanwhile, the New York Times and liberal media outlets are saying he didn't do enough too soon, and not soon enough.
Right. He didn't do enough to protect the people from this so-called virus.
And now, because he acted when he did and rolled out these vaccines too soon, he's now being blamed for the injuries that took place as a result.
And death. Right.
So this again, we're reiterating, but we want to just drive this home that, and you don't hear Trump coming out and denying
it,
and or defending himself.
It's starting to go there. If it actually came out where, Anderson Cooper made like a bold statement like that, then Trump might be forced to say something. But because it's Deborah Birx, who's safe in her retirement or wherever the hell she is, and because it's Fauci who's getting ready to exit and move on, he feels it's not quite. His handlers, his image makers, his media,
right, not him.
People tell him not yet. Don't respond.
But see, here's where I'm coming from with this, and that is that he's just part of it.
Yeah,
he's
so
part of the narrative.
Like this is part of the act. Like, yeah, he's the foil. He was set up on the foil. Remember the meeting he had with the Clintons on the golf course back in 2014, 2015? It's like, hey, look, we're gonna turn you into the foil, and we're going to make you the bad guy.
Hey, why
for the
don't you run
next
for
10
president?
years.
Yeah.
Everything is going to be your fault. Okay, yeah, sure. How much are you going to pay me? How much is it worth to me? And how far are you going to take it? There may be some things that he is like surprised over. Like, wow, I didn't realize that you would raid my my wife's shoe closet. But okay, you weirdos. But that kind of thing. But so Civil War happens, I guess, and then we'll close this out, when a certain population wants to blame another portion of the population for something, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it's like back, when it was the first round of the Civil War, what was the problem there? Like, really quickly, give us a history lesson in 30 seconds. Go.
I mean, everybody's told it was about abolishing slavery, and it
right.
had nothing to do with that at
right.
all.
Right.
It was everything about economics, and right. They did abolish slavery, but it wasn't Abraham Lincoln. It was the
insurance companies,
the insurance companies, and the underwriters.
So the marketing around the abolishing of slavery was
politicized and
right.
turned into a political
right. So there was a marketing campaign to cover for the fact that insurance companies were losing money over their chattel,
right. and the
insuring their chattel,
and the
right.
so-called Confederate states in the South
right.
Went to war because of an economic. They saw it as a war on them. I mean, it was an economic war on their the way they did business.
Right.
And but they blamed the federal government of the United States as opposed to the insurance companies.
Could you apply that same logic to today's sort of existential Civil War? Like, who's losing? Like, what company is losing that we need to create this narrative of the us against them kind of thing? Like, do you know what I mean by mm-hmm. that? Like, could you apply that same?
No, it's a different situation altogether. It's completely different. And what it is it's about splitting people up because basically we're all being attacked equally and equitably, in a number of different ways to achieve certain
right.
things. So, we were reading some stories about vaccine injuries, and the people who don't die outright are then financialized through the medical industrial complex through new drugs that they have to start taking, multiple surgeries, therapy, all these things mm-hmm. all cost money, and they're draining the bank accounts of the people who've been victimized because they lose their insurance at
right.
work, they lose their job.
Can you imagine?
So basically,
perfectly healthy people, robust,
mm-hmm.
beautiful, healthy people who have their whole life ahead of them, and they're in their 20s and 30s, and they're at the pinnacle of health, have become so they've become mutilated and maimed. Mm-hmm. They've lost limbs, they've lost their income, they've lost their ability to stop shaking, they're bleeding profusely, they have, pock marks all over their face. I mean, this is an attack on the robustness
mm-hmm.
of our society.
Right.
So of course this is a larger thing. And so people who did take the injection and now are, completely changed and are altered and probably disabled for the rest of their lives as a result of taking the bioweapon, or the series of them, because not everybody who took the first shot is sick. I know people personally who took a shot, maybe even
right.
two,
right.
and they're fine.
Yeah, well, like we were talking about this before, and we should wrap this up. But it's a class war. But I think eventually everybody's and regardless,
we're starting to see more and more people
right
in the higher income brackets being affected by this.
And what I would say is you need to go back and watch our video, The Reason, because it's talking about the lack of information about how people die, which disallows people to start to ask questions about the whole thing in the first place.
So how does this relate to close this out, please explain how this relates to Civil War?
Well, we are being attacked from multiple places. We're being attacked financially, we're being attacked philosophically, politically, and from so from all angles. And if they can't hurt us from their point of view or from what they're doing, they're going to have us turn on each other for two reasons. One is it weakens the population and allows them to do more, because we're fighting amongst ourselves. We're not working together to fight them. And then it will also start hurting, breaking down the society in general. They're basically, everybody talks about population reduction, and they only think of it in a one-dimensional way. This is another way of reducing a population, breaking it down from within, creating situations that break down morale, creating situations where people are fighting each other, creating situations where they don't have any money and they become desperate. Then they start committing crimes. Well, what happens when you commit crimes? Well, you can be put in a prison. Well, what happens when you're in prison? Well, they make money from you. Right? So this is all about making money from the population while breaking down society so that they have more power over us altogether.
Right. I do definitely see, in regards to the actual, like when people think of this very sort of superficial definition of civil war, I do see this language coming out from people who are allegedly on the right side of history, like, when is the Civil War going to break out so that I can go after, the people who forced, the citizens who forced other citizens to get the vaccine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't really feel comfortable with that
language.
language.
That's not good. And
I know it comes kind of sort of comes from the right place, but I don't
it doesn't.
I guess
no,
not.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
it comes from a reactionary point of view that is stupid and just basically not seeing the big picture.
Right.
We are being used, folks, especially those of you who are wishing the Civil War would start. You are being used.
Yeah. Maybe don't wish for that. Maybe just don't go after people.
There's
either
no reason,
on social media, a fit of rage, or in the real world.
Well, that's just it. There's, the state is inciting violence,
right?
And they're inciting this idea of the Civil War. So it's. And they're, and again, it's coming at us from different ways. I mean, even the school shootings and the church shootings and all the shootings.
And that's with huge quotation marks
right,
around them.
Because we don't believe in that. We believe that these are all
it's
theater.
All theater.
And they're also, again, it's like the propaganda is coming from different directions. And so on one hand, they're pushing the narrative of civil war. On the other hand, they're getting people to give up their guns. Or they're pushing the idea of people giving up their guns.
Here's my reaction going back to the first subject matter. I see a bunch of people today on the bus, whereas for weeks or months or maybe even almost a year now, people had taken off their masks, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, despite the fact that the CDC says, hey, you don't need to do any of this stuff anymore at all, please stop, people are putting them back on their face. And so, maybe in 2020, my reaction would have been one of anger. Like, why are you walking around looking like a slave?
That was my position.
Why are you choosing to do this? You're bringing everybody down, and you're proud of this. You're proud of looking like a slave. Well, today, when I saw it all happening again, and I saw a bunch of people, putting their masks over their faces as they got on the bus, my reaction was a lot different. That's their choice. If they want to look like a slave and they want to look oppressed, and not only that, they want to look kind of stupid, because there's no scientific evidence whatsoever that a mask does anything.
Except,
Yeah, it just covers your face. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to look that way, then that's their choice. But as long as it doesn't bring me down. And so that's what's happening, like, at least in the public transportation sector. The public transportation is like, we don't care. It's your choice. Like, we really don't care. We're not going to dictate.
Well, you told me that the sign for putting on a mask is off, and
right.
And
so
they're now looking for personnel.
So at the front of the bus, when you see your bus line, like for us, it's the number 24. So I look at every bus. Oh, okay.
The placard that changes.
Yeah. So it used to say masks required or
masks
that's
been gone for a long time.
On board,
though.
But now it says we're hiring.
Right.
So,
but what about that little
signs? Those little
sticker
stickers, they just fade away. It takes too much effort to actually take them off.
Yeah.
So they'll just fade away with weather and over time.
I think what's pushing the new masking it's all voluntary, right?
It's all voluntary.
You know, they trained people enough to just, you know, do it, you know, whenever. But
right.
you know, between the so-called long COVID narrative and the monkeypox narrative, you know, these are things that get pushed and recycled, and it's just going to push people into wearing these things again.
Right. And so coming back to the idea of civil war, you can avoid it by not caring what other people do.
Right.
It doesn't affect me. If you want to listen to deceptive narrative and you want to be influenced by deceptive narrative and lies and secrecy, because that's what's going on, is your government is holding secrets from you that could really harm you. The secrets, you need to know them so that you could know what your government is really doing to you. So it's lies to cover up the secrets. It's all this false stuff. If you want to believe that, that's your choice. I'm not about ready to engage in a civil war because you are bringing society down. You are bringing culture to its knees.
And let me just say,
I will not.
Yeah, and let me just say that, you know, the narratives that are coming out in alternative media by certain pundits are also state sponsored. Anything that you feel gets you excited and freaked out, like, you know, food is going away, and
right.
you know, this is gone and that's gone, and who knows what's going to happen, and your energy and your you know, and this is going to be taken away, and you're going to be put into FEMA camps. Anytime people talk like that, question their motivation.
Yeah.
Is it because they're getting a check from the state? Think about it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, and please be a subscriber or a patron.
You can, if you join as a patron or you join Rockfin, you can hear our podcast that's dropping tomorrow. We're going to be talking about behavior modification.
Actually, it's dropping today because it's Friday.
No, today's Thursday.
No, well, we're recording this, but it's going to be released on.
Right.
It's called a Friday Freebie Footnote.
Right.
So yeah, if you want to hear our 90-minute podcast about behavior modification, please become a patron and or make a donation or subscribe to Rockfin, and you will hear it.
Okay. And this is a series that you can continue hearing if you join Rockfin or become a patron.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.